In today's video, we'll be looking at Inktense mistakes and how to fix them. So as always, most of the advice in this video also goes for watercolor pencils. So if you don't have Inktense pencils in particular, but you have some other type of water-soluble pencils, this video will also be useful for you. We'll be looking at not only mistakes in methods of working, things that perhaps you didn't know were an easier way of doing things, but also physical mistakes like scruffy lines outside of edges and how to remove them. So let's get started as we go through 10 Inktense mistakes. So mistake number 1 is not using the right paper. So let's take a look at what you need to work with your Inktense pencils. So let's talk about paper options and decisions, and to some extent this is personal choice. So let's look at our options and apply some water. Firstly, I've got this piece of printer paper. Now, not only is it far too smooth for it to pick up much pigment, it's also very fragile because it's very thin. Next, let's look at another smooth paper, not quite as smooth, it's taken more pencil. This is what is sometimes called in Europe cartridge paper, and this is the sort of high quality paper you'll find in a sketch pad. This isn't a bad result, and if you've got a sketchbook with good quality paper and you just want to add a little bit of water-soluble pencil, then it's a good option for you. But it's still quite a smooth paper, so the medium is going to sit in puddles and you will still get quite a lot of buckling because it's still fairly thin. You might also have some pastel paper. Now, although this takes dry medium quite well, there are many different types of pastel paper, but none of them are designed to have water on. And again, you're going to get possible holes in the paper and it's not going to spread the pigment very well. It's also going to buckle very badly indeed. At the other end of the spectrum, I have this mixed media paper, and what we find with this is that although it takes a lot of pigment, it tends to stick to a very textured result, so it's quite hard to dissolve the medium and we'll end up with a lot of uncomfortable sketching marks left behind. Finally, we have a watercolor paper. So this is a medium surface one, and this is designed to take any medium that you're going to add water to. If you're doing a large piece, you can also, if you want to, stretch your paper and that will stop it buckling like this. That will happen on any paper that's unstretched, but if you're just doing a small sketch, it's not really a problem. Now, at number 2 is not so much a mistake as a missed opportunity. Sometimes, particularly in the early layers of your painting, it's a good idea to fully dissolve your Inktense pencils. Let me show you how it's done and why it makes such a difference. So I'm working on this Satsuma painting here. This is actually part of an upcoming watercolor pencils and Inktense course that I'm making at the moment. This is one of the modules. I don't know when you'll be watching this video, but that course will be available towards the end of spring 2025. And I always have discounts on new courses when they launch, so keep an eye out for that. And you'll notice here, I've been working on this area up here, but you'll notice this first area is very smooth, and that's because I dissolved the Inktense and applied it like ink or like paint. So let me show you how to do that. Now, I have this special palette here from Caran d'Ache. It's got a textured surface, and so I can scribble on it and we can dissolve like this. But don't worry if you don't have a palette such as this. You can actually just use a scrap of watercolor paper, or you may be able to find something in your kitchen. I know that some people use an old chopping board, or I have seen Tupperware lids that have a similar textured surface. So you can just make your own palette. Now, some people have said to me, why would you do this? You might as well just use paint if you're going to dissolve the Inktense pencils like that. But the truth is you want to keep the same colors that you're already using. You may not have any paint, you may be traveling. There are all sorts of reasons why you want to dissolve the actual colors that you're using and then go on top later on. Look at the beautiful effect I got here just by dissolving that first layer. You can also use this for backgrounds. I'll show you one of those that I've done later in this video, or for shadows or any areas where you just don't want any texture. My next mistake, number 3, is not applying your pencils in the correct direction. So sticking with this picture I'm working on here, and I need to start putting some shading on top. And what you'll notice is that I'm following the shape of the Satsuma. Now, one disadvantage that any kind of water-soluble pencil has is that sometimes marks are left behind. If the item has some texture, that's absolutely fine. But what we want to do is make sure that we're going in the direction naturally following the shape of the object, and then if anything is left behind, then it's not going to be a bit out of place, it's not going to look incongruous. If you're doing something like a landscape, I would always suggest keeping your sketching as horizontal as possible to give that flat landscape feeling. And so as I come in with these various colours here, I'm making sure that I follow the shape of the object. Mistake number 4 is not letting underneath layers dry before adding more colour on top. Now, it's very tempting with any water-soluble medium to just keep working and working on it while everything is wet. That doesn't help to set the layers into the paper. Now, whether I'm working with Inktense, as I am in this tutorial, or watercolor pencils or standard watercolor paints, there's a certain amount of settling into the paper that happens as the medium dries. And sometimes, especially with watercolor paints, we also have a little bit of natural glue in there. Most mediums are mixed binders that are going to help them set onto the paper. And if you don't allow your first layer to dry, then it's likely just to lift very easily, even in this Inktense medium. And if you don't believe that underneath layers of Inktense lift, then I would refer you back to one of the videos that I'll link in the description of this one when I actually tested this out. Allowing your first layers to dry is going to help everything to stay put as you work on top. Mistake number 5 is scruffy edge marks. Now, this isn't too much of a problem if you're using a background, but on white paper it can look a little bit disastrous. Let's find out how to remove them. So you'll see in this picture, I have some scruffy edges where I did my initial sketching. I don't like to use graphite pencil underneath another medium like Inktense because it really can get trapped under the layers and make everything look a bit muddy, but we have these scruffy edges. Now we've got a couple of options. One of them is to just sharpen that edge up, and we'll be looking at that later in this video. But then there are areas where we have these marks that are really outside of where I want to work, and we're going to lift them out. Now the manufacturers will tell you that Inktense doesn't lift once it's dry. First of all, I've found that to be quite untrue, and I'll link to another video in the video description where I actually test lifting out some of my colours. But this scruffy edge around here, this hasn't even been dissolved, and the manufacturers only claim that it stays put once it is actually dissolved. So these should lift out no problem at all. But what I want to do is make sure that I don't mess up the edge I've already got. So I'm going to mask the area off like this and isolate it. We can cut and tear the tape into a shape if we need to. Now I have stuck this to my clothing a few times. It's got some fluff and some lint on there. That'll just stop it being too sticky and tearing my paper. But you could also use a low tack tape. I've got a cotton wool round here, so this is just pure cotton. I'm just dipping in water and just really squeezing out so there's hardly any water on it at all, but it is damp. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to rub this mark out. Now it's important that you don't go towards the edge of the tape, that you go along the edge of the tape so that you're not pushing anything underneath. Now how much it will lift out, just like watercolour or any other medium, depends on which pigment you've used. I can't be certain they'll all lift out. You may have to do something a bit drastic like put a background in when you weren't planning one, but that's okay. Life is full of adjustments. So what we'll do now is we'll peel this tape off. Now you always want to peel tape off at a low angle like this so that we don't tear the paper. There's our mistake gone. I'm going to go round and tidy up some of the others now. Did you know that YouTube really doesn't care how many years of teaching art experience I have? It doesn't care that I've made over 400 videos. It doesn't even care that this channel is fully cat approved, but it does care about things like likes and free subscribes, sharing the video with a friend who might find it useful, or leaving me a nice comment. So I'd be super grateful if you can do those things for me. Helps this video to succeed. Mistake number 6 is another missed opportunity, and that's always applying your pencils to dry paper and never working into wet paint. Let me show you what a difference it can make. So an Inktense pencil will release a certain amount of pigment, but if you work onto a wet surface, it's going to release even more pigment. So when I want to get these little dots and these little dimples in this Satsuma here, rather than putting those red dots on and risking them just dissipating into the general colour that I'm mixing here. I'm going to go on top whilst everything is still wet, and then just a tiny little dab will release so much pigment. So if you've got anything like lines or dots, it can be really useful to work directly onto wet pigment. And if anything looks, too bright, or you just want to manipulate it a little bit, you can then take a damp, not wet brush on top and just soften things a little bit while still retaining the original marks. Mistake number 7 is not working light to dark. Now, I'm not talking about the traditional way of watercolor painting where you apply light colors first. I'm talking about the direction you're blending colors together. Let me show you why it makes such a difference. Let's talk about applying your water light to dark. This is so important. So I've drawn a couple of shapes here. We can call them leaves. And let's think about how we're going to apply the water. Now, what I could do is start on the green here and come up like this. The green is the stronger of the two colours, so it's really going to overwhelm that yellow. I'm not really going to end up with yellow. And if I keep working on it, I'm just really going to end up with a uniform colour where these two have mixed together. But I want to maintain different colours. So what I'm going to do instead is start with the light area like this, and then come down into the green like so. And I'm being very careful not to drag this colour all the way up. So I've now got green on my paintbrush, so I'm going to rinse this paintbrush and just dry it a little bit so it's not too wet. And then I'm going to come back into the yellow here because I've got that touch of green at the end there. So we'll go up and agitate that a little bit, just making sure that I don't drag that green colour up towards the top and that I control my colours by working from the lightest, weakest colour and then going into the darker colour, and by regularly rinsing and drying my brush. Have you ever tried to fade out your colour to white paper and get that lovely soft blended edge that you might have seen other people do, but you just end up getting a load of hard edges? Let's fix that now. So let's talk about blending out edges in the wrong direction. I've drawn a couple of shapes here. They could be petals. And what I want to do is blend this top edge up to white paper. So what most people do is they'll get to about here and then they're going to clean, maybe dry their brush a little bit, and then they're going to try and blend out the edge like this. The problem with this is you're just pushing the pigment further up and you'll still end up with a hard edge no matter how hard you try. So what we're going to do is something different. We'll start the same way by wetting and agitating this colour here so it's all nice and dissolved. But what I'm going to do this time is clean my brush and come in from the top, and I mean quite a long way away, perhaps to the outside edge of the areas where you're working, and then we're coming down to touch the Inktense pencil. Now, if you get a lot of bleeding, it just means everything's too wet, so you can dry your brush and lift a little bit. And you just need to make sure that you're not going off the edge where the water is at the top. Don't work on it too long. In this way, you can get a beautiful, natural looking, faded out to white paper edge. This first method will always leave you with a hard line. Number 9 is a mistake that goes for any medium really, and that's not working in a limited palette. Let me show you why it's particularly important when working with a medium where you've got lots of colours in front of you, like a nice big set of Inktense pencils. So I want you to notice something as well as this painting I've started here. Look down the side here, I've written my colours down, and I will try whilst I work on this picture not to use any other colours than the ones I've swatched at the beginning of this picture and decided that I'm going to use. Now, it's not an exact rule. If I decide later on that I absolutely need another colour, I'll just add it in and write it along the side here. But I've got, let me count, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colours, and I'm hoping to do all of this picture with just 5 colours. And the reason for that is if you don't work in a limited palette, your work won't have, shall we say, a style, a personality, feeling to it. And this particular Satsuma would have a completely different feeling if I worked in different colours. It might still look like a Satsuma, but I could make it bolder. I could make it a little bit more autumn based with warmer, darker colours. Now, it's quite easy to work in a limited palette when you're using tubes of paint because they're a bit of a pain to get a lot of them out. But when you've got a set of pencils and you've got absolutely loads of them, it's It's really easy just to forget about keeping a limited palette and just to dip into everything. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have lots of colours. I always have lots of colours in all of my mediums. I love to have as many colours as possible. But I'm just saying that within each picture, you want to try and restrict that. So you want to start by swatching your colours. And then you want to think, can I, for example, if I want to put a shadow in here, as I'll be doing later, can I get that shadow colour from what I've already got here? Or do I need to add another pencil in? Can I mix a green from a yellow and blue that I'm already using? That's always a better alternative than bringing another pencil in. If, on the other hand, I really need a green that I can't mix from that yellow and blue, I'm not going to compromise this picture. I'm going to add that other colour in, but I'm going to still keep to as few colours as possible. This will stop your work from looking a little bit amateurish and gaudy and a little bit out of control, as if you didn't have any set idea of where it was going. So always try to work in a limited colour palette. Now, we talked about scruffy edges before, so we need to sharpen our edges up. It's the one thing that makes watercolor pencils or Inktense pencils look a little bit amateurish and scruffy. So let's talk about how to fix it. So let's sharpen up this scruffy edge here. So there's a few things I can do, working from light to dark. So I'm going to come in this way and start agitating the Inktense. So working down here, got a little purple in here for shadow, cleaning my brush. And what I'm going to do now is, as I come around, I'm going to just take the brush out a little further to cover up that scruffiness. I can also, if I want to, with a fairly sharp point, I can go even more precise like this. And now we've lost our scruffy edge. So do let me know in the comments what you enjoyed most about this video, and if there's anything that you're going to take forward into your own work. And before you leave this video, don't forget to have a look in the video description. I've got all sorts of free stuff down there for you. You've got some free downloadable PDFs, even a free watercolor painting course that you can take for no money whatsoever. And if you enjoyed this video, I'm going to put another one up that I think you're going to enjoy equally as much. You can watch that video right now.